I tend to stay away from the show after reviewing Do and Wales Lazlo, which one of them is terrible while the other is really good, but at the same time, knowing full well that I was planning on going back to these shows as part of Cartoon Crisis 3, it's no surprise that I'm gonna get back to this show eventually, and I'm planning on doing another episode review from this show while Lazlo needs to go to the bathroom and Edward prevents him from doing so. Livin Vida Lumpus is the episode where I can't be able to take anything seriously in this show. Like, in episodes that I reviewed in the past, aside from Samson Needs a Hug, I at least understand what they're trying to do, but with a poor execution that drags them down. In this episode, it really feels like that every single character, mainly even Lazlo's friends, aren't able to do anything in order to fix something that is a lot more simple to fix rather than having Lazlo being completely like Lumpus. And to be honest, whenever I think about Lazlo and Lumpus or Lazlo and Edward, it's immediately thinking about SpongeBob and Squidward. You know, it's one thing to understand that that's one of the positives of SpongeBob for the right reasons. It doesn't change the fact that the relationship between Lazlo and Lumpus, or Lazlo and Edward, if there ever was a relationship, it's not gonna convince me to tune into this show after my years of watching the show when it was airing in the 2000s. The episode begins while Scoutmaster Lumpus shows Lazlo the many reasons onto why he dislikes Camp Kidney, and this leads to Lazlo not enjoying anything at all after listening to Scoutmaster Lumpus. Here's the thing. I know I may be spoiling this, considering of what happens at the end somewhat makes sense, but judging of how the story is executed, it made little sense of Lazlo's motivations. Like, I understand that Lazlo is likable if he's written well, and in this episode, along with Samson Needs a Hug, it's difficult to take his character seriously knowing that his motivation is just to have Scoutmaster Lumpus enjoy Camp Kidney. Even though it's gonna result him on being like Scoutmaster Lumpus's attitude in order to annoy Lumpus, all the while being farther apart from his friends. Secondly, Lumpus in this episode is a demonstration onto why it's difficult to take him seriously as a character 15 years after this episode. Granted, it's gonna be 16 once we hit into July, but knowing full well that it's difficult to look at these shows that have aged really poorly, then it's difficult to find any enjoyment from any of the characters, because Lumpus in this episode really hates everything about Camp Kidney, and while I understand that some adults feel that way, it just makes me question onto why he is still running the camp instead of just retiring altogether and do other things. Like, the final episode may retcon on the idea that he was a scoutmaster for so many years that he wasn't a fraud, but at this point, I really don't know what to believe anymore. Because let me tell you, I honestly found Lumpus in this episode honestly a much more lazier and difficult character to sympathize than Squidward, which is really saying something because I'm not a fan of Squidward, even though that he is supposed to be the most realistic and sympathetic character in the entirety of SpongeBob. In most of the episodes that I've seen, even if he may have good intentions, it's difficult to see him in this position as a scoutmaster, knowing full well that he is honestly ungrateful for anything, basically. Like, it's really hard to understand that even if people who run camps can be grumpy, and it may apply to other adults who run facilities, but considering that all that Lumpus does is being lazy while most of the campers do most of the work, then I honestly don't understand how to feel sympathy towards Lumpus for how he's executed. And considering that Lazlo is being like him, even though that he's only doing this just to make sure that he can actually have Lumpus enjoy Camp Kidney, it doesn't change the fact that after this episode, Lumpus will hate Camp Kidney all over again. This is basically the Loud House before the Loud House became a thing almost 10 years after this episode, which is really saying something considering that the Loud House has the characters revert back to their personas rather than learning the lessons. And in all honesty, the fact that Lumpus doesn't learn anything and he's only doing this just to have Lazlo get snapped back to his old persona just sums up that Lazlo's motivations in this further proves that even when he's optimistic, he instantly just does these things in order to do something differently, but it doesn't give me any satisfaction whatsoever, and it's just seeing a grown man just trying to be like a kid in order to have a camper who is a kid not acting out as an adult. Like, I understand that this show isn't meant to be taken that seriously, but when it comes to these types of material that is being dumbed down, then this is one of the reasons onto why Camp Lazlo hasn't aged completely compared to Ed and Eddie, or even the other cartoons that I actually rewatch even decades after they aired on different networks. That's the thing. This show has similarities of SpongeBob to the point that people are annoyed that this show is being called out as a SpongeBob knockoff. But the thing is, if the show doesn't have interesting development or anything that actually makes this a lot more entertaining, I would be better off watching Summer Camp Island than this. Not to be mean or anything, but judging of how Summer Camp Island is an improvement over the show is really saying something. If Lazlo was intentionally trying to make Lumpus enjoy Camp Kidney in order to be like him, then it just really raises a lot more questions onto how he could have done it much more differently in order to make an episode interesting. Because as far as I'm concerned, Lazlo is mostly aware of what is mostly going on around him. Mainly his best friends using his tuxes that he and Clam ends up becoming the Tux Fairies, or mainly Lazlo being the Tux Fairy, or anything else that can resolve a situation simply, mainly. Like, I understand that Lazlo isn't supposed to be smart or intelligent, but at the same time, whenever he does stuff like this, it just makes me even more confused rather than feeling satisfaction in the ending of this episode. Even if I have to rewatch these episodes in order to give a new understanding of them after watching them for a decade and a half, I can instantly remember most of the moments where Lazlo does good deeds for the right reasons. So just watching this episode is a demonstration onto why I can't be able to take the characters seriously when they're having downgrades for the sake of downgrades. Now, this isn't one of the worst episodes from this show since I've talked about those episodes, but the thing is, I don't even think I'm ever going to take anything seriously, and the fact that I'm planning on reviewing the episode where Lazlo needs to use the bathroom and Edward is preventing him to do so, believe me, I have a lot to discuss onto why I do not like Edward in the same ways as Lumpus in this episode. I'm giving this episode a 4 out of 10.